Welcome back to Tawana Talks, where I believe leadership is a dance everyone's invited to, even you with two left feet. Each week is a new track where we are chatting about the moves you make to lead yourself and others to success. So lace up those dancing shoes and let's dive into creating those supportive steps together. Ready to move with purpose? Let's hit the dance floor. All right. Hey, and welcome to Tawana Talks. I want to thank you for tuning in today to Tawana Talks. I am Tawana, and I am the founder and CEO of TL Collaborative Coaching and Consulting. And my mission and focus is on nurturing leaders for lasting success. For today, I am graced with the presence of Danielle Patrice. And Danielle is a 37-year-old mother of two boys and originally from New Jersey. She graduated from Tennessee State University in 2008 with a bachelor's degree in science and speech communication, also focusing on mass communication. Danielle is passionately an advocate through her personal experience in creating awareness for domestic violence to further implement change in victims and survivors. And so first,
all right. Well, thank you so much, Tawana, for having me. I'm so excited to be here. But you talked about Tennessee State University. Yes, that is my alma mater. And the thing is that that's where really it all started for me. As far as meeting my abuser. So this was back in, I would say it was early 2008 when I met him that year. I was a senior, and I didn't know him before, but it seemed that we did have mutual friends when I found out later on. But he was a upperclassman from what I remember. And what I mean by that is he came in a couple years earlier than I did, and we never met till that point. So, but anyway, yeah, I was a senior, and my user in Spanish class. And when I met him, we didn't know each other, but it was a combination of both classes from the previous semester. So it was two different Spanish ones, and when Spanish 2 came, we all came into the same class. And so, one of the things, I was very well acquainted with my Spanish teacher, and we still closer to this day. And we met over the summer. And so she ended up telling the class, yeah, I saw Danielle and, at her job, and I was working at this particular restaurant. And so he called, he said, yeah, that expensive food. And I chuckled because I used to say that place was expensive as well. This was 2008. The gas prices wasn't, it was getting high back then. So, it's not like, it's a little bit today, but it was the beginning of that. So, we used to chuckle at that. Little later into the semester, there was a particular group assignment where we all had to do a Spanish rap, and we had to learn the vocabulary. So I'm from the East Coast, as you know, and the culture is different, especially in the South, even how we talk and whatnot. And so I had to, in this group project, we had to present this in front of the class, and I'm preparing myself and rehearsing and see how I'm going to do this rap. And so when I did my part, and I had to, pretty much rap in front of the class. This is something that I was not used to doing. And the first thing came out of my mouth, he said, oh, she's not from here. She's not from here. And after the group project, we just got acquainted, got well acquainted, and became very fast friends. And he would walk me to class. He would, help me fix my car. I mean, I felt like he was a great guy, a great person, and I just had a great time, talking to him and whatnot. I graduated in 2008, but 2009, 6 weeks after I graduated, my mother committed suicide at the age of 44, and I was 22 at the time. And so I bring my mother's passing up because that is definitely the turning point of my life. Prior to that, who I was as a person was, I was ready to take on the world. I was ready to go to grad school. I was ready to get into, all types of whatever the world had to offer. And I was just ready, to leave Tennessee State and go to my next journey. And that changed. So for me, I ended up finding out that my mother, she hung herself with the scar from the bathroom rod. And that was traumatic, very traumatic experience for me. I'm my mother's only child. And he, along with a lot of my other friends and family, they came to my house. Some of my family, flew in from other states to, pretty much bury my mother and, deal with her loss, and so he was a great friend. He got well acquainted with my family as well. And I didn't pick up on that he liked me. Actually, my father picked up that, I found out later that he liked me. They said, yeah, he likes Danielle. And, before we were dating other people, and I had stopped dating this particular guy, but he was still with his girlfriend. And so, or so I thought at the time. And, while dealing with all of that, again, he was there. He was there as a friend. And at the same time, I'm also having to figure out how to deal and step up not only as the next of kin, but learning about how to become executrix of my mother's estate, learning about all of these things a 22-year-old is not even prepared to learn, but had to learn, and having to take care of her financial situation as well after her passing. And with that, it drew a wedge, between me and my family. And in the same breath, my father, who has said to basically to me when I was still mourning, even grieving my mother, that, well, you need to move on. You need to get over it and move on. And I grew up in a single parent household. I grew up with my mother. So my father never raised me. And it was just, to me, I felt it was like audacity. It was just, the disrespect I felt towards my mother. Like, I know they didn't get along, but it was just, to me, you didn't care enough about me that I'm mourning my mother, and so for that, that also caused another estrangement. And they also became friends, I don't say closer friends, but we were good, very good friends with my now ex-husband. And it led to this road trip. I was planning to go back home, go back to Jersey and see, wanting to get out of Tennessee and just wanting to have my, how can I say, just the nostalgia. Let me say that. Going back home, going back to people where people knew me, people knew my mother. I was not ready to step out and go into the grad section, not even at that point yet. And, he said, well, I'm going back home myself. Why don't I drive? Let's go on this road trip. And you come back and you go back to your home and drive, from where he lived to my home. I said, okay, that's fine. All right. So we're going on this road trip. And so we ended up shortly after we started dating. And I mean, very shortly after that, really started coming together, and it was like a whirlwind. Everything happened so fast, and it was just like within a few weeks, short of that time after that road trip, he's like, "Yeah, you're going to be my wife." And to be, I'm like giddy, like 22, like, oh my God, you're going to talk about getting married, and because it was like for me, and I had no business being in any type of relationship after the mourning of my mother. This was months after her passing. And it was just like, okay, I'm ready for it, or whatever the case may be. And so I ended up getting pregnant, and I ended up going back home anyway, because I pretty much had moved back to the East Coast. And, so it's like, okay, I need to go get a job, get an apartment, get a car, get everything I needed to get prepared for my child who was coming in. And I did all of that. And he would come visit where we were. And then towards the time when my son was about to be born, he officially had moved in together. And I had moved into this particular apartment that was owned by this organization, and this pastor was over it. And this person I knew from, we have shared relatives. And I've known this family for pretty much at that point for a good long time, like at least 20 years. And I thought I was well acquainted with them because I knew them from, they helped eulogize my mother, they eulogized my grandparents, my great aunt. So we all knew each other at this point. And my then ex-husband, he had moved in with us, with me and my son, of course, we all together. And he's staying there. And then it was told, hey, look, y'all gotta get married. Y'all been staying there for a while. Y'all gonna have to get married or he can't live there. And so at this point, we're like, okay, we're gonna get married. We did talk about it before, but it was just like, okay, we're gonna have to get married. And it wasn't until like the really first incident, physical incident. Now, prior to when we were dating, yeah, like there was, I'll say, even being together, there was an uneasiness. There wasn't not feeling safe. I will say that, not feeling couldn't put a pinpoint on it, but it's like I just didn't feel safe in the times, not knowing how to get out of this type of situation with him. This was prior to even his own mental issues. And then and the way that he would talk, some of his tone, the way he would talk to me. And it wasn't until the night before the wedding, that's when things started, I felt, turned a whole different way, because we got into some sort of argument and he had pinned me down and he said, I can do whatever I want to you now that you'll be my wife. And that was the scariest time for me, trying to go through the wedding and having to deal with, who am I dealing with at this point?
Wow. 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 Thank you for, sharing your story. That is just compiled with, a couple of things that's deep. I'm sorry about the hearing the passing of your mom, and then
Mhm.
having to be thrusted into a form of leadership that no one could even prepare you for. And then being in a relationship that had its um, traumatic intricacies that, again, no one could prepare you. No one sits you down in a board meeting and say, when the passing of a parent happens, here's your job description. When you're
Right.
coming against an abusive relationship of any type, whether that's a parental abusive relationship, a marital or a boyfriend or girlfriend abusive relationship, whether it's a boss abusive relationship, no one says,
Right.
here's the job description. And so I just want to talk a little bit about, because you had mentioned some of your focus areas being on empowerment and family engagement. And I think all of that is together, as well as being innovative and resilient and then starting over. Let's go into some of that, because, like I said, you mentioned about what I'm hearing, um, even with moving into the home that you moved into, in the pastoral community, or the individual saying, all right, in order to stay here, you have to get married. It's almost like the pattern of just being pushed into a form of leadership that now you have to figure it out. What does that what does that look like, as far as an experience that you've experienced in that? And what would you feel like are the solutions or the approaches for those who may be listening, on how do they navigate a space like that now that we've kind of lived through it? And I say we, I mean, now that you've kind of lived through it, my thought process is, I always say experiences that we experience is never just for us, it's for someone else. And so if you had been talking to someone that may be in the situation that you've already experienced, so kind of giving that job description, what would be some things that you would say on with regards to the approaches, and what could be effective for how to navigate those spaces?
I think that, looking back on those years, it's very much a customized type of situation or solution, because it's not a one size fits all. Because I, at that point, looking at finances, I'm looking at just trying to create or build my family together and have this foundation. So I think it depends on the variables that are involved in it. And it's like I could tell someone what to do and what not, but I'm not in that situation, and I'm not in that. I don't know what their circumstances are, but I would say overall, you have to know what you're ready for. You have to know what choice you feel is best for you and your family at that time, at that point, because in that particular moment, I felt like I was doing the right thing. Did I like it was under the either he stays or goes ultimatum? No, I didn't at the time, because I did not know what to expect. For myself, we did talk about getting married, so it was like, okay, it was already on the path. We already knew we were going to get married, but it wasn't, you know, the way that it happened. It was, it's kind of like a hindsight is 2020 type of ordeal. But I feel that if you're not ready for that type of commitment, if you're not ready, then don't, have, don't go through with it. See if there's other alternative options that you may have, if there's other support systems that you may have, or overall just try to see if you can get out of that apartment if you could. And if not, and weigh all of your options before making that solution. And that's what I felt I was doing at that time.
Gotcha. Some of your focus, and I feel I hear your passion when we previously just kind of set this up, was how domestic violence impacts the whole person.
Yes.
And I know that you said that some of your studies that you're doing in that, and wanting to, even write a book and do some more research in that area. Um, and speaking about that and how it impacts, the family, how it impacts the person, as in regards to their resiliency, the innovation in their reestablishing themselves, if you will, and starting over in the new beginnings. How do you envision the future being in relation to nurturing leaders in this area, where, people who may have experienced domestic violence, what do you envision that being in the areas, scope and sequence of those areas of how can they be nurtured, so that they have
We
lasting success?
Well, the key word, like you said, is nurture. And I've said this before, where there's a lack of empathy. We have in the society become, well, oh, I feel sorry for you, thoughts and prayers. But you're not thinking about, what if that's my child? What if that's me? What if that's my family? And the thing is that, we talk about taking out the emotion, or we're all talking about, oh, everything is logical. But the thing is, you got to have both. You got to have some compassion and empathy for what that person is going through in order to understand the laws that need to be made. Because hopefully, I would love to envision a society where there are a lot more resources for victims and victim defendants, so that victim defendants, which are people who are victims, but then they're fighting back and then they end up getting charged and grouped along with abusers. My thing is that I would love for there to be enough resources, enough understanding, to see, what can be done for victims and defendants. What I like to see is a lot of change within the legislation, within the legal system itself, where there is a combination of understanding with mental health scientists and the legal system. Because at the end of the day, the legal system is it's incident based, and so it's not, understanding what's going on in the brain. And the thing is, your people are only going to go as deep as what they see, in my opinion. So if you see someone who's charismatic and knows how to work the system, a lot of times they're able to get away with it because of the charming, aspect they have. They can charm the pants off of a judge. They can charm the pants off of anyone. And
Right.
so the thing is that, but is that judge also understanding what this person is capable of? Not just by talking to them, because the law says it. Do you understand the intricacies of what's going on in their brain, their personalities? And they don't understand that. So for me, it's really gearing towards, one, working with people who have knowledge and expertise with that mental health and those type of personalities, to figure out what is going on, to, one, get the abusers some help, some much needed help in a much more, elaborate way, and getting the victims and victim defendants the help and the resources they need to not only get out of these situations, but also being able to help them thrive and move on to their next chapters.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So on a societal spectrum, if you will, when we talk about the judicial system and the politics of it, I think that is, great. How that's deep. Um, if we can scale back just a moment and think about the practical sense where maybe we can have some conversation. When I say tackle, because two people can't, eradicate it, but have conversations or start to spark conversations, scaling it back where we can look at some practicality of it, with regards to maybe having conversations in ways that could possibly mitigate even getting that far. What in your experience, what would you say could possibly be some practical things that maybe a marketplace owner, a business owner, a boss, could provide or do in the scope and sequence of the workplace for a victim, or an abuser, to kind of mitigate that and support them so that they can thrive. Um, yeah, that's a loaded question, but yeah.
No, no, I know, I get, because my thing is that with work environment is definitely not actually to talk about that in a part of my experience dealing with working. And the thing is that you also have to understand the job has to understand the CEOs, they have to be educated. The managers have to be educated. People have to be educated on a level, not just the work environment, people in its entirety. Because we hide behind, as a society, we hide behind the titles of that person and what that entails, but we're not looking at, okay, well, what the person deals, what is that ordeal of that person, what is going on in all of our lives, that central theme. We all have children that we have to make sure we can go take them to childcare to make sure we can work. We have these, so how do we navigate that? How do we navigate certain things? And then now we're talking about domestic violence. This is on a whole nother level. The thing is that it's got to be enough one understanding of domestic violence and how it impacts the workplace, the workplace environment. Because I'll tell you this particular story. When I was in the middle of my abuse, there was a time where my husband, he choked me and he would not. He basically wouldn't let me go, and I said, "Go off, get off me, or I will call police." And he ended up saying to me, said, basically, "F you and the police." And long story short, called the police. He took his keys that I used to take to work with me to go to work, and he took them with him to jail. So I couldn't get the keys to go to work, and because of that, I lost that particular job, and I ended up getting laid off from there. And because I had explained what was happening. So the thing is that you got to have compassion, and people didn't even know what was going on because like, wait, she's not showing up to work. What's going on? And that's a very scary thing. So you have to understand, have the empathy of what's going on with that individual. See if there are any ways to have some resources from a work environment. But also the thing is that we all follow like the federal laws, state laws as well. So that means they have to have, if they can't just have anything from the state or federal, then have something internally that if there are some, emergency situations, the job that I talked about earlier, my mother passed, they did a wonderful tribute or benefit concert for her to help raise funds for my family.
Right.
You know, they could do something, some incentives like that to help bring a more nurturing environment so that if there are some situations like that, know that they're not alone and know that they are cared for. But you have to have the type of empathy to do that and not just worrying about the work productivity.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I saw a picture that I kind of reflect back on in some instances, and I'm probably going to describe it not that well, but I think if I can remember it correctly, it was like a circle, and then it was a circle in a circle, and it was like this. The big circle was your life and everything that happens in your life, and then the circle inside the circle was work. And it was like basically saying work is only a piece of your life. It's not your whole life. And I think sometimes organizations get caught up in thinking that the job of the organization and of that person, the job of that person for that organization is the greater part of their life, and not realizing that um, everything in their life impacts who they are as a person. In order for people to show up well, they have to be treated well,
Right.
and treated whole. And so I think that you hit a great point when it talks about empathy. And really just stamping that is like people can say, like you said, empathy is like, oh, prayers with you, that's not empathy.
Right.
That empathy is actually not physically, but actually putting yourself mentally in someone else's shoes, and then operating under the premise of understanding what it could possibly be like, and even asking, stamping questions so that you get a better understanding, but also creating an environment where individuals can feel comfortable with kind of talking about some of the things that typically society makes you not feel comfortable about. And I know that you did not say this fully, but kind of hinted on it, in an environment, in a situation where you are, undergoing and experiencing domestic violence. Oftentimes the victim feels embarrassed, like it's their fault. So they don't want to communicate it to anyone, because then it's like, what's wrong with you that that's happening to you? And now now you're ostracized, and then you don't, those types of things. And so being empathetic is kind of creating those environments where you can have the space for people to show up well and communicate when they're not, and understanding that if all I have is 40% today and I give you my 40%, then that's my 100 in that space.
Right.
Um, so again, the purpose of the talks are to create a collaborative space for leaders in all aspects with regards to seeing how, seeing yourself in someone else, but then also being able to make strides in closing gaps of what that could look like moving forward. And so I asked them for, just a call to action. What are some key messages or takeaways that you would hope that the listeners would gain from this conversation that we had today?
Well, I definitely wanted to touch base when you were saying that the domestic violence, people don't want to talk about it because it's embarrassing. And, I want to make this very clear. In the beginning, yeah, I can understand it, because of it's very, it's the shift, the narrative, let me say, is, based upon, I don't want this person to think of this. I don't want this person to think. And the thing is, and you have to be honest, I have to care what somebody else thinks for
Mm,
me to think it, to be embarrassed. And at the end of the day, this is about life or death. I don't care what you think. I don't care how you think. I'm trying to get some help. I need help. This person needs help that I'm with. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure I get the help I need for me and my family. So
right.
that's so shift that part of it, because it's not about the image. Now, a lot of abusers, yeah, they do have that, the image base, because they need to show, hey, I'm not this monster, but she is, I am not this, and that's the thing. And once you shatter that image part of it and you see what it really is, you take a step back and really see, like, oh, this is so much deeper than what I anticipate. I didn't know he was like this. I didn't know this person was like that, because you don't know a person unless they're behind the closed doors.
Mhm.
We wear the mask, and that's everyone in all facets of life, whether we're in the, working and whatnot. But when you're in a situation like that and you're, fearful of your life and you're trying to make sure, you are able to stay alive, and you're being threatened constantly, this person could kill you. Yeah, I want to make sure that I'm able to live another day and continue to be the mother that I need to be for my children, continue to be and be alive to see that. So I think that that's where it needs to, one, understand that this is not about embarrassment. This is about someone who is a predator, who is preying on a victim, who is actually this, and they come in the form, they could be in the form of your best friend. They could be in the form of someone that you thought was a great person at your work, at your job, someone that you thought that you trusted in the church, someone, it comes in so many forms, and they study you. And the thing is that the difference that they are unarming you because of their charm. And one thing I definitely want to make point to your listeners is that, the difference between serial killers and domestic violence abusers. Serial killers already revealed themselves. They already done told you who they were, but they coming to get you, they're coming to kill you. And it's very quick and it's very rapid, and guess what? The police want to get them as quickly as possible off the street. The difference with abusers, they slow walk you because they haven't revealed themselves until it's time. They're putting, and you people are assuming, well, this is just a lover's quarrel, and it's not. It is a predator who is slow walking you, and you have to make sure that victim is out of there before they decide to kill him. And that point is when they're ready to leave, or a victim is the most dangerous time, because that is when there is heightened and that person may kill them. And there's a lot of victims who have lost their lives because of this situation. This is not just this person, oh, he's, I'm embarrassed. This is life or death. And that's what I want to people to understand, that, because at the end of the day, you and I, we're both mothers, we're both women. And not to say it's not against, there are men victims, but my focus is women victims.
Right.
And the thing is that you'll have mothers, sisters, nieces, daughters, cousins, friends who may be in a situation like this, who may have been in a situation and maybe in the future. You need to know what kind of situation that they may enter, and you need to be proactive about it instead of being, critical and judgmental about it because you want to save face. Get to help this person when they need it, especially when you can tell when they're who they are, because when they're losing themselves, because this person, what they're doing is they're taking your love and they are exploiting it, they are manipulating it, they're twisting it and turning it and turning you into something that you're not, and you're basically losing everything about who you are and becoming nothing but a shell, and leaving you broken and leaving you destroyed. That is a predator.
Right.
That's not somebody that loves you. That is you. They're using your love to control and through their own pain. And so that's where you have to understand what's being revealed, what's being unraveled. It's not fast like a serial killer, but it is, it's unraveled. And that's where you need to take the severity of the situation.
Right. The one thing that you said, one of the things, not the one thing, one of the things that you said, I think is really powerful and a great takeaway for me. And I'm hoping that, I want to stamp it so that it can resound and echo. You said, for me to feel embarrassed, I have to care what you think. Um, that is significant in this regard and a whole host of regards. And we talk about people showing up well in life and in their jobs and whatever they're doing, parenting, whatever they're doing, is kind of shifting your focus. What's your goal? What's the goal? And so in this instance, the goal is survival. So I don't
Right.
care what you think because my goal is survival. And so I'm not embarrassed because I need to survive. And so I really want that to be stamped and resonated. Again, I'm all about support and supporting leaders, and so I want to ask, how can we support you? Is there anything that's upcoming? Any upcoming projects? Any events? Any initiatives that you want to speak about with regards to supporting your initiative and your passion?
Well, I feel like if people please get this book and please start educating yourself about domestic violence. I would love to meet with the leaders. I would love to meet with politicians, anybody that's willing to meet with me so that we can get this I don't say movement, but get this situation handled, eradicate domestic violence. I want the awareness, but I want the understanding because you cannot change what you don't understand. For me, I would love to, further my research, get into a graduate program so that I can continue this fight. But, I want this in the hands of people empowered so that maybe they can change things. I want this in the hands of people who are, regular, who may not understand domestic violence. I want this to people to understand it's not about just making a profit, but this is about understanding, this is about saving people's lives.
Yeah. What's the
So
name of the book?
it's called Neuroscience, the Ecosystem of Domestic Violence.
Neuroscience, the ecosystem of domestic violence. And if people wanted to reach out to you, go ahead and tell us your social handles or your email, that, people, ways that people can contact you.
So I'm on Instagram. I use Speak Danielle Patrice. I'm also on LinkedIn. I believe it's Danielle Patrice, and I'm on Twitter. Well, X, formerly Twitter,
I'll
and
never call
it's yeah, I know. And it's a different handle, but it's author D Patrice.
Author D. Patrice. So on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, you can definitely hit up Danielle Patrice with regards to further being an impact and changing the narrative for domestic violence victims, as well as bringing awareness to abuse, and so that we can be able to shift some focus and shift some way that we support in that manner, with hopes to kind of closing the gap, not kind of, but closing the gap on the instances of domestic violence happening. And so, Danielle, I just want to thank you for coming on Tawana Talks, where we are definitely focused on nurturing leaders for lasting success. And I hope that this does resonate with others so that we can be able to work towards closing that gap. But I thank you so much for your time and sharing your story. Again, that's very courageous of you sharing a multiplicity of things that help to shape and develop who you are today. Any closing words from you?
No, I just want to thank you again for this opportunity. Thank you for having me. And I just hope that people hear the story and people look at themselves and see, what they can do as well. Because we're all interconnected and it does take a village to help. It takes a multitude of people. There are strength in numbers. And so I'm just hoping that just by one podcast at a time, that domestic violence can be eradicated.
Definitely. Thank you. And again, in order for me to care what you think, or in order for me to be embarrassed, I need to care what you think. And so for this instance, it's all about survival. Thanks again for listening. And Danielle, thank you so much for being a guest.